Gifted Talks Fundraising offers you a seat at the table for a relaxed chat about what it takes to build successful giving programs. Marshalling decades of practical hands-on experience, the Gifted Directors provide helpful advice and top tips for achieving your fundraising goals. Here we are again. Welcome back to Mill Street for Gifted Talks Fundraising. And I'm delighted to have, again, travelling all the way to the centre of the universe here at Leamington Spa, Amy Stevens. Welcome back.
Hello.
And Chris Goldie. Welcome up from London.
Thank you, Andrew.
We've got the Gifted Directors together to have a bit of another coffee table chat. And this time we're going to be talking about legacies and that extraordinary gift, lifetime gift that can be made, and how often we've experienced and seen that in various fundraising campaigns. But just, Amy, there's some key stats, aren't there, when we think about legacies that many people may not appreciate. So what are we seeing out there?
So legacy giving is one of those areas of fundraising that clients often don't really harness and get behind. And we see those organisations who do it well, really thrive. They could have 30% of their income coming from legacies. So as you say, a few key stats. 35% of people say that they will leave a gift to charity in their will. But in reality, only about 7% actually do that.
Only 7%?
7%. So that says a lot about how charities are actually communicating with their audiences. Are they putting a convincing case out there for legacies? Probably not. We're probably not talking about it enough in general. In terms of the marketing as well, 70% of legacies come from women. So we need to think about who we're communicating to it and in what way, whilst obviously not discounting any group. The stats are there. So
basically this is because women live longer than men
in general,
and end up being the final, if you like, estate distributor. So there you are, Chris. Our days are numbered, mate.
Yeah.
Always known, Andrew. Always known.
So okay, the women end up with the money, but only 7%. Now Is that partly just not understanding that, if you like, experience of getting them in as regular donors and nurturing that relationship and actually seeing this as the final gift? Or is it, why the conversion, the difficulty from 35 to 7%, do you think?
I think it's because people treat legacies like a taboo subject.
Right.
They don't want to talk about it. It's talking about death.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks I'm dead sinister because I love a legacy campaign.
Do you?
I think they're really uplifting. I think they can be, just game changer for charities in, really making people feel part of that organisation when, sometimes a legacy bequest is the only gift somebody can make because they don't have the cash to, make a cash gift at that moment. And the stats say that by 2050, there'll be roughly £5 billion made in legacy commitments.
To back up again,
in the UK.
£5 billion in the UK.
So it just shows what potential is there if charities seek it out and do that properly.
Okay.
And some of that is balancing kind of some of the theory versus the reality.
Yeah.
So we all tend to think, we know about legacy giving. You can leave a gift in your will, that's fine. And people assume that there's this national awareness, but actually people don't really talk about it. And it's something we need to talk about a lot more, particularly in terms of tax advantages. Mm-hmm. So we know the current statistics about reducing income tax threshold from 40 to 36% when 10% of the estate is left to charity. We know that as fundraisers, but one of our clients, just this month, we did a survey to their database. Bear in mind the majority of their donor, the demographic, is 55 plus. 75% of their donors did not know that there was any tax relief available for leaving a gift to charity in their will.
Wow.
So it's really important to understand, and I will come on to this when it comes to planning your campaign, but understanding what your audience does know and therefore what your legacy program needs to look like and how you shape that to give them the best information they need.
Chris, you've seen some experience of this, particularly with some of the cathedral clients we've worked with as well. I mean, and the arts area.
I think it is commonly known that people live longer these days than they used to, and therefore older prospects, particularly in the, say, cathedral community, where there may not be a lot of immediate wealth available, but there is an asset that there is a reluctance amongst older people to just say, yeah, I'm going to give you £10,000 because they actually don't know what they may need going forward.
They don't know what their estate's worth, do they?
Absolutely. If you live well into your 90s, but you're at home for 10 years, that's costing a significant amount of money. And a lot of people are very reluctant to have to part with that or to feel that they can part with that. But what they are prepared to do is to turn around and go, well, look, I can only do this much now. But by the way, you're going to get my house, or you're going to get half of my house, or half of my estate, or whatever it might
be. Yeah.
And that's therefore, and particularly if they are nearer the end of life, even in their 80s, then we as fundraisers should be able to embrace that, and our leadership should be able to embrace that and say, well, actually, this is a good deal for us. I think coming back to Amy's stat about 7% and 35%, a lot of it is the same as when somebody says, I'm going to give you something, and then never do the follow-up element, and this comes down to resources. And I do think a lot of charities, and particularly those who control the finances of charities, be they trustees or finance directors, they don't see the benefit of legacy fundraising as they should do, because it's not immediate cash in the bank.
Yeah.
And they're always battling with that. We need to raise a certain amount of money this year. Yeah. And what they haven't quite factored in is that for every time you secure a legacy that you might get in 5 years' time, you may well pick up a legacy that you knew nothing about from 5 years ago.
And how much of this is, in fact, just short-termism, if you like, in fundraising planning? I mean, the irony is that people who leave a legacy actually live longer than those people who don't, so the stats show. And interestingly, even more so, those who leave, who make a will even live longer than those who don't. But because charities don't necessarily know who's leaving them legacies, they don't actually continue to reinforce the positive benefits of a legacy gift. And consequently, people tend to switch, don't they? They will in later life convert their legacy that was going to go to their church or their school or their sports club or something, and it will suddenly now go to the end-of-life charities, or hospice, animal charities in particular also benefit, and then those sort of end-of-life legacy bequests.
I think as well, legacy campaigns are approached in a really passive way because, like I say, people are scared about talking about this subject.
Yeah.
And actually, a legacy campaign should be a proactive major donor campaign. It's about talking to people. People actually feel great relief when they can speak to you openly about where they want their gift directed to.
My dad passed away recently. That's what he really wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
In the last couple of years, his life was exactly what, in inverted commas, his wider legacy was going to be, and where he wanted to make gifts, and exactly what the outcomes should be. And believe me, I was told exactly what needed to be done.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I think if you look on most institutional websites where there's fundraising, support us type messages, there'll be something on there about leaving a gift, a legacy gift or a gift in memorial. But there's no proactivity about it. It's purely passive. It's purely reactive. There's no suggestion, well, if you're interested in becoming a legacy donor and want to join our legacy club there's nothing of that. There's very little of that in there. And so in the same way as a nation we're reluctant to talk about money, full stop, coming back to Amy's point, there's an even greater reluctance to talk about money after you've died, because death itself is a taboo subject. And yet it is a really important part of any fundraising campaign.
Part of it's how the story is told around legacy giving. And just if I could share, it was a prominent UK cathedral. I won't name the cathedral. We ran a legacy campaign there. It was for their music endowment. But we wanted to tell the story in a first-person way around the impact of legacy giving. So the way we presented it was as if you were overhearing a couple sitting on the bench outside in the church, in the cathedral precinct, talking about how Joe Bloggs has left a wonderful gift in these new benches in the precinct, and how isn't it brilliant after the fact that last year they helped repair the windows, and the year before that didn't they pay for the choir tour, and so on, and then it finishes by saying they're amazing people. It's a shame we never met them.
Yeah.
And it showed the legacy, the immortality, because the motive for legacy giving is immortality, isn't it, Amy? It's about perpetuating a set of values.
Well, I had a similar lovely experience with a cathedral client who one day someone said, there's a woman downstairs, she wants to talk about her legacy. So I went, oh, fantastic. So off I go to see this lady.
You're off. Okay.
Yeah. And she was quite well. She couldn't get out of her car at the time, but, so I just knelt down, was chatting to her, what is your connection with this place? And she said, oh, I was a chorister here when I was a little girl.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to speak to somebody because I really would like my gift to go towards music because, that was my thing. And I said, of course we can do that. Gave her the form, talked her through everything. She came back with the completed form a couple of hours later and some flowers to say, thank you so much. I feel 100% better, know exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to go to my solicitor and sort it out. Which was lovely in itself because you've kind of you've been through that process with the donor. But then probably 4 or 5 years later, that client phoned me and said, can you remember this lady? And I said, yeah, I can. And we recalled the conversation. And she said, she left us £400,000.
Wow.
Purely because somebody took the time to have a conversation with her.
Being
and
open.
It was that simple.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting thing in that, and it's older people or people who know that the end is near. I saw a friend of mine recently who's been diagnosed with a terminal illness. They almost enter a state of sort of comfort with that.
Very much so.
And what they want is actually just to sort everything out that they're happy with.
Yeah.
So they know that, at some point quite soon they might pass away, but they've sorted everything out. You said about your father. He was like, this is what we're going to do.
Organised,
right, I can go now. That's done. And actually, when you think about that logically, you're treating them just like you would any major donor. You're discussing what they're interested in. In your case, Amy, it was the music at the cathedral that prompted this lady. And you're giving them the opportunity to just make peace with themselves. And if they happen to know that they are sitting in a house that's worth a lot of money, or they've got lots of money in the bank, they're not going to spend it, they've got no kids, they've got no grandkids, it's a very nice way of it's another box being ticked off their list, presumably. If we all, thankfully, touch wood, we're not approaching it, but you get to that point where your time with us is not that long, you almost have a checklist in your head. Have I done this? Have I done that? Have I done this? And one of those areas may well be legacies, but until you have the conversation, you don't know. And if we're reluctant to have that conversation, and we've all had clients go, well, I couldn't talk to her about that. It's a bit more big, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, no, they actually they're probably inviting you to just have that discussion because they can then be at peace themselves.
So is this, in the communication sense, I mean, where do you start? I mean, you mentioned before about, people volunteering and coming in. But, if our clients are listening to this today, where do you start in building your legacy program?
So a really good way is to start with surveying your community.
So the existing database
Your existing
of contacts.
database, yeah. And asking really simple questions about what they know about legacy giving. So do they know about the tax benefits? Would it be helpful?
So just pause there. What is the current tax benefit for legacy giving? So
currently, if you gift 10% or more of your taxable estate to charity, your inheritance tax threshold drops from 40% to 36%.
That's cool. And all our listeners, if they should go and seek independent financial advice to confirm when they're planning their estate. However, that's actually quite significant. I mean, as in reducing your IHT liability.
It is. And on our website and in the book, you can see some kind of tables which kind of describe what that could look like. Yeah. And people worry about not being able to take care of their families, but you can do that as well.
Yeah.
And
it's a win-win.
The diagrams will kind of demonstrate, how that balances out. But so learning about that kind of information, would it be useful for them to have advice from a solicitor in terms of provided by the charity? All that kind of information helps you shape your program. What we also find, so the clients I mentioned earlier, who 75% of them didn't know about inheritance tax, at the same time, there was 14 people who said, I've left you a gift already. That they didn't know about.
So by doing a survey, that was like a win straight off. They had 14 now.
Who they know have left a gift. A percentage of those, I think there was about a quarter of those who said, yes, I'm happy to talk to you about it. Others wanted to remain anonymous. But then there was another 20 plus who said, I haven't, but I want some information. Therefore, you've got an open door.
But that's really focused then. You're not talking to hundreds and hundreds of people.
No. And you can then launch your campaign, hopefully, with X amount of pledges in play.
But also that's got to help. You remember what I said just a moment ago about people changing their beneficiaries in their wills in the last 3 to 4 years of life, going to end-of-life charities. If you know that these people now have made a commitment in their will, then surely they're the people you want to invite in and just generally keep informed and understand how legacy giving is going to change and impact on the charity. So that's got to help you target your comms as well and stewardship.
100%. Your stewardship plan, you know who you need to be talking to, about what and when. And it's always really interesting because whenever we do a survey with the legacy questions, one of the questions is about recognition.
Yeah.
And we offer various different things of days out and this, that and the other. And 9 times out of 10, the most popular thing that people want is a simple thank you letter.
Yeah.
That's all they want. And quite often a legacy giving newsletter, so featuring stories of other people who've, made a bequest and what have you.
And particularly when you may be building an endowment around a certain thing. So, actually, if you leave us your money, it's going to go into a long-term endowment that's going to help us. Let's take the schools market. We talked about it in the podcast previously, bursary giving. Well, if you're creating a large endowment that one day will produce a certain amount of money every year for bursaries, you're giving that. In your lifetime, while you're still alive, you're able to read about the bursary successes at the school.
Yeah.
And that is of great comfort because you can actually say, okay, well, one day my money's going to help this to happen.
Yeah, quite
and that's
right.
comforting.
It is.
And that recognition, Andrew, and that's why, identifying how the people want to be recognised.
Yeah.
But also say, let's get people together for lunch once a year. There's an elite group of people who are coming together. They're all probably going to be quite elderly.
And lunch is a better call than an evening.
Lunch
Don't get them out at night.
No,
They'd much happily come out for lunch. Yeah.
Meet a few people, make them feel good about themselves.
And hear stories about others and their gifts and what impact it's had. It's interesting. In my little parish church, there's a massive distrust for the diocese, and I don't think that's unusual across, and us paying our parish share. How many times we've heard that story, and where do we know it's going to go, and all the rest of it. Years back, the local doctor, the village doctor, as you know, left all his estate to the church, but only for the maintenance of the parish building church. So he didn't want it to go to the diocese. So there, he was actually in effect really targeting how, and because of that, very much the church is open today. I don't think it would be otherwise because of the maintenance costs of a medieval church building, but really impactful.
Can you remember the one we did? And another church. We're talking a lot about churches here. People do leave legacies to all sorts of organisations. But the church client where a chap who said, yes, I'd like to chat to you, and I went to see him, and he'd left his entire estate, which was worth 1.2 million. And he wasn't even a churchgoer.
That's true.
He just said, do you know what? I don't want to see the landscape without these churches dotted across it in the future. And I want that to be there for the future. Therefore, that's why I'm leaving this gift.
Because actually that's
incredible.
That's really interesting. It's the motivations for legacy giving are, I think, quite different from the general pledge or charitable giving that we see day to day. As you get to that stage in life and you're making decisions around where you'd like your estate distributed, it is very much about the preservation or if you like, preserving or providing, encouraging the values that were important to you. So in the bursary programs at schools, it's because you want others to have the benefit that you had of the education at that particular school. And likewise for faith-based groups, it's interesting, I'm doing some work with a Hindu temple at the moment. Again, legacies are featuring as part of that, as a way, a generational and again, there is a certain amount of naming, I've got to say, around that as well. But the point I'm getting at is that if you can offer immortality, and I don't mean of their name, but of their values that are important to them, that's a win. Then, 100%. What you just said is bang on.
If you work on the theory that legacies are almost the ultimate philanthropic gift, aren't they? They are both literally but figuratively.
Yeah.
And philanthropy is motivated by what you want to give to and how much you can afford to give. It's simple as that. You can't force anybody to give to something they don't want to support. Otherwise, it gets resented. So the reality is with a legacy gift, I often find very often that the motivation is clearly there. It's, I love the institution, whether that's a cathedral, whether that's a school, whether that's a university. And I love what they're now doing in a certain area. Or, as we've seen in some institutions, it really needs to have this type of facility. And so my legacy, I'm going to give them that money so they can build that particular. Sometimes naming comes into that. There's the immortality is not just the knowledge, but also the physical naming of their building. But it's the last gift you ever make.
Yeah.
And you wanted to make sure it goes to the right causes.
Yeah.
Now, we've seen, it came also from the US, the concept of planned giving. And I'm just wondering if I could just outline that and then give you an example of where I've seen it work here. The concept for planned giving, as you guys know, but is very much where someone during their lifetime might give to a bursary scheme, so to pay for school fees for, let's say, a child to attend a school. And so they pay out of their taxed income now, and they pay so much a month, so much a year to keep them effectively to keep going as long as they can. But then the planned gift is they then put a balloon legacy at the other end for a sum of money that they estimate will generate us enough income to keep that scholarship or bursary running forever, in perpetuity. Forever's a long time, so that planned gift has massive impact on the organization, but it does speak to immortality, because as long as they're, throughout, they're forever going to be this happening. Now, we had this at a cathedral choir situation where choristerships they had to be funded. So we did that sort of program, and there were 12 choristerships to be funded. We're trying to work out how best to do the recognition. And ultimately what we came to was that their choral scholar would wear as a medallion when they came into the cathedral the family crest, and it would be done properly, hung around their neck, and that in effect means that forever someone will be singing in the cathedral that you, through your life's work, have enabled and funded. And it was really, really powerful. All 12 were taken with the families around that area who wanted to make sure they'd named their choral scholarship with a planned gift.
Yeah, and interestingly, even within the context of a capital campaign that you've got pledge giving over a certain period, one of the blocks very often when you speak to older people is that uncertainty as to whether they might be around at the end of the month.
That's a good point.
But if you actually turn around and say, well, of course, you can start making a gift, but just all you need to do is include this codicil in your will that your pledge will be honoured. What that very often does is not only ensure that the pledges will be fulfilled, it gets them thinking about a further legacy.
Yes.
So actually it's a double win, because you've got the commitment, but you've also started the old brain ticking about what can happen in the future.
So, Amy, can I come to you then? If I'm, listening in here as one of our potential clients, where do you start in planning your legacy campaign?
So the first bit, like I say, is understanding where your current donor base is at with that. So what information you need to put together. And then you've got to develop a programme. So what does that look like? Will it contain written literature? Yes, of course, you need that. It's really handy to have some guidance notes with your charity number on and how the wording should be written for the different types of legacy, whether you're leaving a percentage or a set figure, etc. So that it's really easy for an individual to take that to their solicitor and say, I want to do this. Here's the paperwork. Here's the number.
People hate paperwork,
everything.
don't they? You got to make it so easy.
It's very simple. Yeah. Like 2 sides of A4 explaining what needs to be on there. And then what we also do is pledge cards. So once somebody has confirmed their wishes legally, they complete the pledge card. It's not legally binding in any way.
No.
But it's that act of, like you mentioned, it's the act of saying, I've done this. That's my pledge. If they're then stewarded properly, it's highly unlikely that they'll change that pledge,
so true.
Because they've made that commitment by passing over that sheet of paper almost. Again, really important can be hosting sessions with solicitors. So local solicitors will quite often come in and do a session about lasting power of attorney or putting your estate in trust. Answering some of those key questions that really worry people, like you said, Chris, about, oh gosh, but am I making sure I've taken this into account and that into account, etc. Some people love that, works really well, and solicitors will give free sessions, free will writing for standard wills for a certain number of people. So that can work really well. And then, like any major gifts program, having people in your organisation prepared to stand up and say, I'm in, I've done it.
Yeah.
And we did at BSR, Andrew, if you remember, the British School at Rome. We had people make short videos, which then featured on the website. Yeah. And I think we gave them an opening sentence, didn't we, of I've made a gift because or something, and everyone started. They
told their own story.
Yeah.
Very
and it's
powerful.
So powerful. Yeah. So it's, like I said, it's about talking.
It's about people.
Yeah.
It's really about people. It's people's story. Their legacy is their story and how they want to see it continued. It's a very moving experience working with people making legacy gifts. I quite agree.
My view's always been that you treat your potential legacy prospects as you would your major gift prospects.
100%.
You cultivate them, you get to know them, you make them feel valued, you listen to them. And the only difference is that one may write out a check that you can spend the cash there and then, and the other, you may have to wait a few years. But the reality is, if they have lots of wealth, be that tangible wealth that they can use now or asset wealth that will become available one day, you want it. And I think the attitude that any fundraiser should take, and this is where you need the blessing of the people above you, is when you go into a meeting with a major gift prospect, and it's the meeting where you're going to talk about money very specifically, if you come out with one or either, you've succeeded. That is success. And I do think that gets undervalued. And I do know a lot of fundraisers who are doing that very well, and it's not being appreciated by the people who employ them. And that attitude needs to change, because fundraisers can make a really big impact.
It's also, Chris, it's just not true. I mean, it's an awful way of describing it, but the maturity of legacy pledges is actually far shorter, particularly once you get over volumes of over 100 pledges, let's say, for a charity. Within 5 years, you're seeing seven-figure performance within 5 years. And I've had to have this conversation with bursars and CFOs in different charities from time to time. This is not a next generation income stream. You do this now, and it's relatively cheap to do as well, isn't it, Amy? I mean, it's one of the lowest cost forms of fundraising you can do.
Well, it's high ROI because it's major gifts fundraising ultimately, isn't it?
That's true.
And I think there's another kind of less
sorry to be so brutal.
less joyous point to it, in that there is still a huge amount of fraud in relation to legacy giving and estates that are managed often by families, where they don't want to honour a family member's wishes when money has been left to charity.
Oh, okay.
We've been told this by numerous solicitors that we've worked with. So if your supporters are declaring their gift to you, and you're close to these people, and obviously you're going to know when they pass away, you can keep on track. And there's various other things you can sign up to as well that can keep you on track of things. That's kind of
sad, isn't it, really?
It's very sad, but it does help to prevent that future potential fraud of not honouring someone's wishes.
I think that's the key point. And I know, and I've sat in trustee meetings where they're having to weigh up whether or not to fight a contested will situation and the costs, the potential costs, and because their purpose is to undertake their charitable works. It's so it's a really tough call for many trustees.
But that's also where you've got to be honourable in your fundraising effort, haven't you? If, we know sadly there are older people who are starting to suffer from dementia or whatever, of course, and they become very vulnerable. And actually, as fundraisers, we need to be able to recognise that. And say, look, I don't think this person is in proper mind to make that decision.
That sort of commitment.
And so I think we've always got to weigh that. And that's where I think one of the great strengths of British major giving fundraising is that we do it in an honourable way. And I'm not going to cast aspersions on our friends from across America, but across the pond. But at the end of the day, they're much more ruthless in the way that they approach fundraising, and rightly so, because it's a big industry over there. But we just need to temper that a little bit. And legacy is a good example of that, because sometimes there are people who we know would, get persuaded to sign something.
Yeah.
So is there something in getting the family involved? I mean, if for example, I was a mind to leave, I don't know, my large share of my estate to the Australian Cricket Foundation, let's say, Chris, what would, getting my kids involved and understanding how that might work and so on before I die, having me come, let's say, to one of the sort of academies events in the Australian Cricket Foundation, I'm just developing the idea here, where my children join me and they could see that I would want to, that sort of thing's got to make it all work better, doesn't it?
I think it can, but I think, remember, it's incredibly personal.
It is.
Legacy giving. So on the opposite side to that, one of our clients about 18 months ago, animal charity, considerable bequest coming in, split across 5 animal charities.
Ooh.
And the son contested this and said, hang on, that money's mine, it shouldn't be going to these charities.
Mm-hmm.
And the lawyer who this lady had entrusted with her estate produced a letter written by the lady to say, I know that my son's going to try and claim against this legacy. And he hasn't been to visit me for 15 years. So I want this down in writing, that I am in, full state of mind, and this is where my money's going. And thankfully, the solicitor saw it through, and he didn't get a penny of his. Yeah. So families can be a tricky one, Andrew, but I understand what you're saying. Bringing them along the journey and understanding your wishes is really important.
And being upfront about it. Sorry, Chris.
Well, I was going to say, if clearly there's history there that the lady herself recognised, and therefore they were able to deal with it very quickly. I think you would like to think in most cases there's been relative harmony within a family, and therefore I do think that if you can engage the children or the wife or whatever it might be, or the husband or the partner, or whoever it is, in the conversation, that everybody is comfortable that the gift is a secure gift. It's a secure legacy gift.
Yeah.
And that is what I think is the recipient institution, we just want to be confident that if somebody says they're going to give us £50,000, you're going to get that £50,000. May not be next year, may not be the year after, but you're going to get it.
So this is very much a fundraising opportunity, if I could describe it that way, for the next 5 or 10 years. I mean, the stats we were just reviewing earlier showing the baby boomers in particular holding a really large chunk, 78% of the asset wealth, if you like, of this country at this time, and are going to be passing that on.
And so there's going to be a huge amount of inherited wealth, isn't there?
So if you're not doing legacy fundraising, you are missing basically the biggest chunk of major donor opportunities out there for the next 5 to 10, 15 years. Is that overstating it, or would you agree?
I don't think so.
I don't think overstating it. I'd also add to that, it's probably one of the most, if you do it properly, it's one of the most comfortable ways to fundraise. You don't have to grapple with that internal, can I really ask them for that much money? You let them make up their own decision based on something that actually they don't need. Because let's be brutal about it, once you're dead, you don't need it.
No, there's no pockets in a shroud, I had one Jewish gentleman remind me of.
Absolutely.
But actually, too, I think it's also being sensitive to the fact they may want to give a specific asset, as you're referring to, or just simply, I want to provide for my children and this and that, and then what's left. The residual is often the better strategy because, again, in my experience, most people have no idea what their estate is likely to be worth. It could be, I had one guy who passed away, and the biggest, most worth 7 figures was his dinky car collection. He had first edition, whatever, I'm not into that thing, but it was worth an absolute squillion, but he had no idea it was. He thought it was worth something, but nothing like that.
Yeah,
there's plenty of surprises.
It often makes people nervous about doing a pledge form when they're leaving you kind of what's left. And we always say, just ask your solicitor.
Yeah.
What is the very bottom end estimate today of my estate once I've dealt with all the other beneficiaries?
Yeah.
And therefore, you've got a benchmark then, and people tend to be comfortable with that. So.
It's really important. I think we can the sector, the industry, the fundraising industry, across all of the different types of institutions we work with, could get better at it. But particularly those where you have a defined community or a defined membership. It's not a hard sell. You're putting it out there, but if you're just a little bit more proactive in your approach, you can start to engage people. As Amy said earlier, you'll reveal that there are people already who have given legacy. We do the same with the school surveys of a study aimed at alumni. You have a small section about 3 or 4 questions. Again, similar proportion will go, well, actually, I've already left something to the school in my will. And then if you go back and you think, well, I didn't know that.
And it really changes the dynamic when you're thinking about bursaries and building out those funds to know you've got these legacies coming. I have to say, I'm sure you have as well, situations where someone's declared a legacy and then got on in life, they've sold their house, gone into care, done something, they go, I don't really need this money now, you may as well have it while I'm alive. Just, so it's not, it's kind of,
and I think that is the reason why more and more organisations are looking at ways that you can recognise your legacy donors while they're still alive. As I say, whether it is an annual lunch, whether it's regular communications, newsletters, postcards, thank you gifts, whatever it might be. It's because we're starting to value the fact that somebody has made a commitment and you want to make them feel great about it, because they may well turn around at some point and go, there's a little bit more.
Super.
I can do a bit more.
Thanks, Chris. Amy, I'm going to give you the last word. What would be your number one message to people or clients considering legacy or endowment fundraising?
I would just say go for it. Honestly, I know it sounds ridiculous, but they can be really fun.
Yeah.
The stories people will tell you, how open they are about where they want that gift to be spent. And, it really can be fun. We've done some training sessions with clients who are going to launch a program, who are worried about being asked those key questions, and we've had an absolute hoot, in going through role plays and things like that with them. So don't be afraid is the main takeaway. You'll be really surprised by how your community will get behind you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Amy and Chris, for joining me today. We hope that's been helpful for our clients, and we look forward to seeing you all and talking with you all at the next Gifted Talks fundraising. Thank you. Thanks for pulling up a chair and joining our conversation today. Please share any comments or even pose some questions for future episodes by emailing us at inquiries@giftedphilanthropy.com.